So Thomas Frank has decided to finally leave Brentford and join Tottenham Hotspur. Super excited to show you today's video. Really enjoyed kind of listening to Thomas Frank over the last few weeks. Loads of good podcasts and stuff on YouTube, and you get a really good vibe of what he's going to build. Now, Tottenham fans, this will take time. He's a culture manager. He wants to build a new culture. I think he will bring success. However, it will take, I imagine, a little bit of time. Tactically, though, he's quite well set up. If he wants to kind of bring over his style from Brentford from the past season into the Tottenham Hotspur scene, I think they can do it without too many worries. We'll talk about a few signings. You know, we're talking this season in particular, a really good high press. More often than not playing a 4-2-3-1, which has been unusual because a lot of the times he's done 3-4-3s, and in particular he likes a 3-5-2. This season, not so much. I think the loss of Ivan Toney has probably dictated that a little bit and maybe just been a little bit stronger. And now having players like Damsgaard in the team has really seen him focus in this 4-2-3-1. And I think it replicates into Tottenham and, more importantly, into Football Manager pretty damn well. All right, let's get into it. Smash a like on today's video. Let me know if you think it's a good appointment for Tottenham Hotspur. Let's get into it. So we'll do a little bit of stat padding first, just to get kind of a rough idea of how Brentford have performed in the Premier League season. So if we look at some of the statistics, they are ranked, what? 5th in the league for goals, which I didn't realise. I knew they'd obviously scored lots with Mbeumo and Visser, but 66 is super impressive. And more importantly as well, XG per shot. So they've got the best XG per shot, which generally means the quality of chance they're creating for themselves is more often than not a decent chance. Like down here, you know, 0.09 Ipswich, their chances are of lower quality rather than Brentford. Really well in the attacking area. Super excited. If you're a Tottenham fan, I think Tottenham as well, if you look at the sort of like the array of attackers they've got, maybe underperformed over the last couple of seasons. So that is one big plus. If we look at the possession, they are ranked down in 15th in the division. Never been that crazy of, you know, keeping possession. Even the days in the Championship, they dominated the ball, but it wasn't possession. It wasn't that positional play, Maresca, Pep, kind of Russell Martin, let's control with the ball. It's very much still trying to get the ball forward quickly, sometimes aggressively. I think the super thing about Brentford is that they're, by the looking at these statistics, they're super flexible. They can go long, they can play through the middle, they can play out wide. He's built a really good, functional and flexible. We spoke about flexibility last week with Will Still, and I think Thomas Frank is a little bit of a notch on that, with definitely more of an attacking threat than what a kind of a Will Still controlling tactic kind of brings. So forward passes, there you go, 36.3%, quite direct, only 2% lower than Nottingham Forest. There's Everton in there that we always expect, Bournemouth, but they play with quality. Palace play with quality. So we're going to try and get the ball forward a little bit quicker. Pretty strong in terms of the pressing numbers, 459 press sequences. So you can see sort of like the teams that we know press. So they're in and around the teams that press. There's a little bit of a gap. Look, after Manchester United, there's a little bit of a gap to these teams that don't press as high. It's interesting. Newcastle kind of drop off a little bit more than what they have been doing. But there's a super aggressive team. So it's an aggressive press. With the PPDA, once again, not bad. 11.9 in and around the teams that are pressing a little bit more. And their starting distance, so this is the starting distance from their own goal, 41.2. So then into sequences, this is generally about how they're passing and how they're kind of moving up the pitch. 10 plus passes sequences, Manchester City, we should expect. Super high. Brentford down there again in 15th. So not, once again, looking about controlling the game by keeping the ball. Direct speed, so this is how quickly you kind of get from back to front. There's not much difference. You're looking at about a 0.5 between a super possession-based team in Man City and Nottingham Forest, so the numbers are quite small. However, Brentford up there in terms of 5th, so it looks like we're trying to get that ball forward a little bit quicker with average pass sequences, so passes per sequence again, rather low, 3.29. Sequence time again, quite low, so they're having lots of possessions, not really bothered about holding on to that ball. It's can we get that ball forward? Total build-ups, Manchester City super high, Brentford down there towards that 15th place again. So we're definitely looking at more of a direct style. Total attacks, and then into the defending, 57 scored. In and around, they're working in and around their numbers. Look, they're 50. They should have conceded around 56.1. They've conceded 57. Attacking wise, goals scored 66 and an XG. So they've overperformed slightly by 5.81, but nothing too crazy. And one last little one, just interesting. They are first in the division for blocks, which is an interesting stat because, recoveries, they're doing quite well, so they're working quite hard without the ball. As you can see, I always see that as a good statistic, getting the ball back. Interceptions, not so much. They're down there, look, with the better teams, though. That's interesting. As I said at the start of the video, Thomas Frank has generally gone with a 4-2-3-1 this year, and it's, I think, mainly because it gets the best out of this man here, Mikkel Damsgaard. Amazing season. If you're an FPL player, like, you did him in his side. He was an underappreciated hero. His attacking numbers, I'll put them on the screen right now, as you can see, in terms of goals, assists. Superb this season. Not so much of a goal threat, but an absolute beast in terms of creating chances for the players in front of him. When you've got him in Buemo here, a Visser and a Kevin Schade, 3 players that all are very kind of goal-hungry players, like to get on the end of things, like to take chances themselves. You need a creator, an unselfish creator, and that's what Damsgaard has been this season. Now, as I said, they've played mainly with this sort of like 4-2-3-1, and what they've had this year, which has been a good difference, in particular since January when Kayode came in from Fiorentina, really aggressive with the 2 wing-backs. Like Keane Lewis Potter is predominantly a left winger. He's played majority of the season at left back. They did start a little bit of the season with Aya there, so they were kind of building with like a 3-5-2 at times. But when Roslev comes into the side, and then Kayode has pretty much played since February, has pretty much played all the games and has signed permanently, they very much look like an aggressive 4-2-3-1. And what that has allowed them to do with the wide players, get extremely wide. We know Mbeumo likes to work in these half spaces. And Kevin Schade getting closer to Visser. So one stat to look at very quickly, we'll look at his radar, as you can see. Quite low for goals, which we know about because he's only scored 2, but also quite low for shots, which kind of shows that he's not been wasteful. He's not as if he's getting into plenty of areas. Touches in the box quite high, but super good without the ball possession one. Defensive action's pretty good. Touches and dribbles in particular, and creating chances. And as you can see by the chances created this season in the Premier League, there's a lot of passes. These ones here look like corners, and these chances here are generally on counter-attacks. If a team is set back into a low block, these are not really chances. So transitioning by the looks of it, one thing as well that I said we'd look at is his touch map. So you can see he gets into quite wide areas. Now, he has predominantly played as a central attacking midfielder. He's very rarely played out on the left-hand side, look, 8%. But he does like to get into wide areas and roam. As you can see, a lot of passes from the central midfield, and then the touch map, and then this one, the heat map. So as you can see, a lot of touches. Now, you would expect a creator to have more touches and more actions. So when I say touches, I don't mean touches of the ball. It's not as if he's just had 2 touches in there all season. It is 2 kind of actions. So he's done a couple of touches and laid it off. That counts as 1. If he's dribbled in there and maybe taken 6-7 touches, it still counts as 1. Does that make sense? But it's generally, you can kind of get a view of what he's doing. And he's coming into these little areas, and in particular into this left pocket. I've got a couple of screenshots up now, which I'll show you. You can see he's dropping in really deep to collect the ball and move it. He's so good at turning and finding these long passes with runners in Visser, in Buemo, and Kevin Schade. Also at times on that left-hand side, Keane Lewis Potter. So then how does he put all that into Tottenham? And I actually think it's one of the easiest kind of move-overs of a squad you can probably get. So I've built a 4-2-3-1 right here with Spurs. And as you can see, it's kind of well balanced. If we're talking about attacking fullbacks with Kayode and Keane Lewis Potter, he's got a Porro who's definitely aggressive, and Udogie on that left-hand side. The 2 centre-halves are really good in terms of they want to defend. The defenders that he's had this season, Ethan Pinnock and Nathan Collins. I think Nathan Collins has played every single minute this season, have been absolutely pivotal in how Brentford have played, in particular as well, that the 2 6s that sit in front. So, as you can see, Mickey van der Ven, Danzo, perfect. They wanna play a little bit, but super aggressive, super good at defending. So I don't think there's any kind of problem with that. The midfield, the 2 6s, I don't think there's a problem with that. I think he still may go and pick up one because it's the Champions League. I don't know if he might go with Archie Gray potentially. But you've got Benton Kerr, you've got Basuma, you've got Sarr. Now, there's no one as good as a Nordgaard in there who's just an anchor leader. But I think they're more than well stacked in there. If you go with maybe an Archie Gray as a backup, no problem at all. I do think they'll go out and sign a centre-half this summer, in particular if Romero leaves, which is likely. I think they can get him out. He does say no dickheads. That's a big thing that he talks about in a lot of his interviews. No dickheads. And I think if Romero is nudging at a move, I imagine he can become quite a dickhead, basically. So that'll be definitely one signing they need to look at. Keepers, I don't think they will bother with, even though I'm not a huge fan of a Vicario. And then they've kind of got a Jed Spence who can do both full-back roles along with Archie Gray as a decent backup. They've got Bergvall as well, who does like to get forward and create, but he's definitely got the physicality to be one of these holding midfielders. And then the middle guy, the Damsgaard. It has to be James Maddison. I think he'll be absolutely superb at it. He has come in quite deep at times. When Tottenham were playing well in season 1, there's a couple of games. I think it's the game against Bournemouth where he scores a couple of goals, or definitely scores a goal. He's absolutely incredible at coming in and moving it, doing what Damsgaard has done, and I think he will fit that Damsgaard role, no problem. The forward area is a little bit different because players like Kulusevski, not the quickest, a tremendous ball carrier, but will probably do that in Wemero in terms of coming in quite narrow. He likes to be in here and running at players. I think that would his not so much his pace, but definitely his power. So I think that would work. Solanke is definitely a Thomas Frank player. I think gives them the option to really press. Ivan Toney was a decent presser, but I do think Brentford have been able to press better this year because they've had no Ivan Toney and a Visser who we know will run and work maybe not a little bit harder, that's the wrong word, but he's physically capable of doing it at high intensity, at high speed. We know Solanke can do that. The left-hand side's a little bit tricky. I think Heung-min Son needs to move. Like, he's getting absolute pelters that he's not producing numbers for Spurs. And he's 32 years old. He's not going to be the guy in here. It's just impossible. And I do think he either becomes a backup for Solanke and could probably do that pressing forward, a Visser kind of role. He's still got a nice turn of pace. He could probably do that. And then having Johnson, Richarlison maybe needs to move on. So if there was anywhere, we know Tell. I don't know what's happening with Tell. He would be a good Kevin Schade kind of player on that left-hand side. Whether Spurs sign him or not, I don't know. I don't know if it's obligation to buy or optional. I think it's maybe optional. And we know Tino Werner's going. So maybe a wide player, a centre-half, and maybe a holding midfielder, potentially. I think if Spurs went out and spent 120 million on 3 players, I think that would set them up wonderfully well. I think they need to move that level of player up. I think Brentford have done that superbly well, where each year they've done, not these rebuilds, they've just upped their quality in players. Obviously, players like Coyote, Nathan Collins I'm a big fan of, coming in. Damsgaard has taken time to settle, but he's now a wonderful player. I think Spurs need to go out and do that. All right, now we've started the season. We've played a few games. We've actually done exceptionally well. Decent pre-season. And then we've won every single game. And I wanted to make sure that we played the Arsenal and Newcastle games because I thought they would be really good tests. We've started the season with an average start against Bournemouth. I think did Bournemouth score really late? They scored really early. And interestingly, you can see the lineup. We had a little bit of a fiddle round to start with as we tried to get it right. Kulusevski actually started, that's the other way around. Johnson started on that side. Maddison started him, and we had a little bit of a swap. But as you could see, we had him a little bit higher up the pitch. And what we were getting with was Damsgaard, that Damsgaard role, that he was getting too high up the pitch. Remember, we want him to work in these areas here. And he was literally, even though it was an AP on support, he was just not really getting involved in build-up. He was always too high. So that's why we've kind of got that scenario there. And then from that, we then started playing with the shifting system. So he's now playing more of that central midfield, just so he gets on the ball. We know he's going to get high, like he scored a goal here against Arsenal. Absolutely nothing on possession. 35%, but look at that. Only 2 chances created by Arsenal. We deserve to nick a 1-0 win. So what we have got in long throws, Brentford really have been going for it for the last number of seasons using long throws. We've got Mickey van der Ven taking long throws and then get involved in the attack. There is James Maddison. So we've got him at the edge of the area. I think where you want him, because he's capable of doing that, isn't he? So I really do see that AP on support being a really good role for James Maddison if we're going to try to replicate it from Damsgaard. And then at times we're going to go like this. I've not actually asked the keeper to do anything. I think roughly in build-up, we're just going to go long and then we get that, which we'll get a lot of at Brentford. You know, Johnson's done well there to get it, but it's obviously Kevin Schade. He's normally looking at the flick-ons because he's more of the physical type. As you can see, only 46% of the ball, but we've absolutely smashed the game in terms of creating chances. We have been a little bit wasteful, if anything, but it all came together with the Everton game. 4-1, 16 shots. Dominated the ball this time because we're playing against a team that's definitely wanting to sit back and be, you know, I suppose, trying to be difficult to beat. And then here we are in build-up. So Sarr, ball over the top, going forward quite quickly, finding Johnson on the left-hand side into a doggy who's supporting as that complete wing-back. And there is James Maddison, started at the edge of the area, but coming in to score. Solanke from the penalty spot. Maddison, this is where we want him. This is where we want him. Look where he is. He's an AP. This is exactly where Damsgaard would be. Playing in these deeper, wider areas. Like he's moving up now and he's just shifting the play. And what happens is normally with Damsgaard, he's not necessarily the goal scorer or even the creator, but what he is that first key pass. It might be that pass that splits the defence and it goes through sort of like a fullback and defender. It might be a ball into a wide area. It's a breaking lines kind of pass, and that's what we're really getting well. This is why I think James Maddison is going to be absolutely superb at it. And then he becomes the provider again, does Maddison. So he's once again in possession, deep. He's not in this area here behind sort of like their number sixes. He's facing up and getting involved in build-up. He then moves forward into a decent area, but wants the ball at his feet. Damsgaard is a good dribbler, but he's not a good runner. He's not an athlete, and I think that's what kind of, once again, James Maddison is. He then gets the ball, and then we know he's got the quality, drives into the penalty area, picks out a pass for us to tap home. 4-1, big win, and then we went to St James's Park and nicked one. Dom Solanke, 85th minute. We rode our luck a little bit, but the XG is pretty tight. You know, you're going to get this from a Thomas Frank side. You're not going to get, we're going to dominate the ball at all costs. And it was actually a counter-attack. And I'll bring it back because the highlight has not done it justice. So we have used Son as a backup. So it's a clearance. And then we get this opportunity. Now, this is Mbeumo, isn't it? This is Kevin Schade. This is Visser running the length of the pitch. Keane Lewis Potter has done this a few times as well. Into the penalty area for someone to tap home. Low crosses as well into the box. So those are the games. As you can see, we've dominated games. We've been creative. We've been defensively well balanced. And I think we get the defensive balance because of these two here. These positions. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the tactics now. We're going to go through it now. This tactic is a replication. I will say it. I've had some decent comments over the last few weeks. I think people are starting to understand. I'm not trying to break the game because I don't get why people would want me to make them a tactic that instantly wins the game. This is bringing my knowledge of real life football into FM and trying to build Thomas Frank platform. Now you're open to move it around and change it. And there's a couple of player instructions that you can move and change and roles to move it away from more of Thomas Frank. But this is a Thomas Frank replication. Use it as a base. It looks like it works really well in the game, so you might not need to make too many changes. But don't come in the comments and saying, I'm playing with Burnley in the Premier League and why aren't I champions? Because that's not what it's about. All right, so here we go. Sweeper keeper on support, Vicario. No player instructions, all right? When wing back on a support, we've gone with Kyle. Now, I don't want it to be on attack because, so he's only played it like towards the last third of the season, but as you can see with his heat map for Kyle, high touches in and around that build-up area. Not necessarily like he's only had one action in these areas, a few actions in here. So more of a supporting option, you know, when you've got Mbeumo in front of you, perhaps it's not needed as much to venture that far forward. So we've gone wing back on support. The two defenders, Nathan Collins does like a little switch. And I think if you are becoming a really good progressive side and, Spurs maybe sign a defender that's really good at those long passes, they probably will go down the route of a ball-playing defender, someone who's not so much going to do short, sharp passes and move into midfield like a libero. But if you've got a really good passer of the ball, someone who's going to sweep that ball out there, you could change it. But for this, because it's kind of Collins and Pinnock, I've just gone with CD on defend. Suiting the tactic as well, you could definitely go no-nonsense centre-back if you want those real two old-school centre-halves. You get that in. And then Udogie on this left-hand side, if we just put up the heat map now of King Lewis Potter, as you can see, super adventurous, likes to roam, overlaps, underlaps, sometimes plays in build-up. So we've gone complete wing-back on support for him. Now, the middle two, we're talking Yarmulke, Norgard, Janelt and Jensen. Very hard-working, standard setters, aggressive without the ball, but not a lot creatively. Yarmulke is maybe the option with that one, that they've had and played a little bit this season. But I have gone with the anchoring being the Norgard role, and then the ball-win midfielder in the Janelt, who does like to get a little bit further forward. I did think that would maybe suit Pape Sarr, who's tremendous without the ball anyway, but having him on support maybe just allows him to link a little bit. I didn't want to go Volante because I think that would get too high. Maybe if you're dominating and you want to make that little change, a Volante would probably... It does work. It does work. There's no reason why it wouldn't, but once again, I'm trying to keep it as close to a Thomas Frank replication as possible. With your two fullbacks, getting forward height, super important. I think that you have a couple of more players in terms of rest defence, so that would work well, supporting behind the ball. So an anchor, ball-winning midfielder on defend, defensive midfielder on defend, ball-winning midfielder on defend, ball-winning midfielder on support, a defensive midfielder on support will work as well. You're kind of open with those two roles. Just make sure that you have at least one of them definitely on defend, someone who's going to sit in there and not venture into the penalty area or even into the attacking third. The Damsgaard role, we've gone dribble more because he's a tremendous dribbler, high dribbling numbers, and roam from position. With that AP on support being in the midfield and not the cam. You can do it in there, but you just won't get that deeper build-up. And I think it's important when you've not got the super creative players. Damsgaard goes into them areas because, they've got ball winners in here and grafters in here, someone who's not going to really progress the play. So that's why he does go in there. It also helps him defensively. It also sucks in a player and maybe leaves the front three a little bit more isolated with a defender. So it does help with a transition. If he can get on the ball and split lines and then maybe in a 3v3 back there, that would be superb in terms of the pace of the wide players that Brentford have. So AP on support. The left-hand side, the Kevin Schade role, very much direct, getting in behind. Johnson will do it where a prime Son would have been good at it. Inside forward, no player instructions. Kulusevski, we've got on the right-hand side with the player instructions of nothing, because he's all sorted. But we've got inside forward on support because he does like to drop a little deeper, does Mbeumo, and then dribble and drive. If you really wanted as well, you could go sit narrower, but I haven't needed to do that. And then up front, this could be anything like Visser is along the lines of an advanced forward, pressing forward. I've gone pressing forward for Solanke, but if you were super aggressive and advanced forward would work, no problem. So, positive mentality. He always talks about, wanting to create chances. The goal numbers this season have been superb, so we want that. It doesn't have a general effect on possession because we've had super low numbers in terms of possession, even when we went and played Leicester. 30-odd% possession, but dominated the game. Focus to play down the left and right. I'll just put up the focus of attacks now for Brentford this season. It kind of shows you why. They're wanting to create chances with the two wide players in particular and the fullbacks. Damsgaard moving into wide area, especially on this left-hand side. So that's why we've got that on. Slightly more direct. We've not gone crazy because it's not as aggressive as a Forest or an Everton. Tempo high. If you're going to want to play a little bit more direct, it has to be quick. You have to play direct when teams are a little bit unsettled. So that's why we're going with that. Time wasting sometimes, trying to be a little bit more pragmatic. I think if you're one of the top dogs in the Solid division, you can take that off. Mixed crosses. Now, I've had that off because of the crosses. I've got Dom Solanke, who's good in the air. If it was a Brentford one, with Visser not being too physical, he's quite small, isn't he? I would have low crosses on. All right? Play for set pieces as well. Counter press, really good. Then PPDA numbers are good. Their defensive line's not bad. And then counter Everything else left blank. They play short, they play long, they play to wide areas, so I've left that off. Sweeper, keeper on support will then definitely do a nice variation of different sort of like progressions. Out of possession, we've gone high line, not super high, but a higher line because of them PPDA numbers again. High press, trap outside, so we're getting nice and narrow and compact. All right, guys. Now, if you want this file as a direct download, it is all there for the Patreons. Link down in the description if you want to support the channel and get the Thomas Frank tactic as a download. Set pieces, by the way, just go into throwings, attacking third, put long throw on. All right, guys. Thomas Frank, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I am super excited. I really like his calmness, the way he sort of like looks like he treats players, talks to players, communicates, and then sets up a really good, pragmatic, but attacking-based side. I think Tottenham fans, you should be excited. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Take care. See you later.